I might see if Rob's able to press start. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
recording has started. Yes, we're okay. We're ready to rock and roll. Yeah, are we ready to go? Yep.
yes, Chair.
Right, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Adult Select Committee, Tuesday, 29th of September. May I welcome the members and officers and anybody watching in there within Monmouthshire County Council and within the scope of what we're doing here. We have Tony Crowhurst, who is a member from elected to the body of the committee. I'm Simon Howarth. I'm chair of Adult Select Committee for the next term, and I'll go through the members now. Would you introduce yourselves, please, and then officers after? Thank you. Maureen?
Yes. Hello, I'm County Councillor Maureen Powell, Councillor for Castle Ward in Abergavenny and also a member of this committee. Thank you.
Louise?
Good morning, I'm Councillor Louise Brown and I'm a member of this committee and also represent Shire Newton Ward. Thank you.
Ruth?
Good morning, everyone. County Councillor Ruth Edwards. I'm the county elected member for Lintilio Cresceni and a member of this committee. Thank you.
Paul?
County Councillor Paul Pavia, elected member of Larkfield and Chepstow and a member of this committee.
Martin?
Good morning, I'm Martin Grokert. I'm the councillor for the Lansdowne Ward in Abergavenny.
And can I have, who's next there? I've got Tony.
Hi, Tony Crowhurst. I'm representing the Disability Advice Project and I'm a member of this committee.
Sheila.
Good morning, Sheila Woodhouse, member for Growfield Ward in Abergavenny and also this committee.
Have I missed anybody? Louise? You done?
No, I've already introduced myself.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think that's it, is it? Yep. I think that's them all. Right, can I go through officers, please, starting with Hazel?
Hazel Eilert, the scrutiny manager.
Anybody else? Gareth? Dave?
Hi, Dave Jones, Head of Public Protection, MCC.
Good morning, Gareth Walters, Training Standards and Animal Health Manager.
Morning, Lynda O'Gorman, Principal Licensing Officer.
Okay, anybody else? I think that's it, isn't it, Linda? We got everybody there.
Robert McGowan, Scrutiny and Policy as well.
Richard Drinkwater.
Right, sorry, Richard, where are you? I'm just looking on the list here. Yeah, I've got you there, Richard Drinkwater, yeah.
Community Hubs Manager for the South of Monmouthshire, but I'm also playing a role within the TTP team as lead for our contact advisors.
Okay. Nobody else?
I think there's Robert as well, Robert McGowan.
Yeah, I did say hello. I introduced. I think I might have overlapped with Richard a little bit. It's Robert McGowan, Scrutiny and Policy Officer.
Hi, Rob. I just couldn't hear you then, Rob.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's great. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes, here I am. Robert McGowan, Scrutiny and Policy Officer. Morning, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. Cheers. Right, let's get into the agenda. Agenda item number 1 is appointment of vice chair. Are we all happy that Louise sits as vice chair alongside me? Any issues, Louise can step in and take over a meeting. Do I have a proposal and a seconder, please?
I'll propose, sir.
Thank you.
Happy to second.
Okay, that's a decision made. Thank you, everyone. Apologies for absence. Roger Harris. Anybody else, Hazel?
No, Chair, just Councillor Harris.
Okay, thank you. And then we have declarations of interest as and when anybody, if you're not too sure about anything, just step in and we can resolve that and sort that out. Public open forum, agenda item number 4. We don't have any open public forum items on the agenda. Anybody? No?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, agenda item number 5, the Monmouthshire Track and Trace report by Dave Jones and his team. Dave, do you want to just take us through the report, please? And then we'll come to questions. Okay, Dave?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I go through the first report, and that's myself and Richard. Jill gives her apology. Jill Dickin, many members will know Jill. She's actually at the Gwent Incident Management Team meetings that are held now daily. It's obviously a very dynamic situation with TTP, so I'll cover that as best I can. So I can certainly talk on the tracer side, and Richard's here to talk on the advisor side. So yes, the report's been circulated. So it is the one that's subject test, trace and protect progress report. Members will recall they had a report to this committee last July, and that was very much the very early stages of setting the system up, which was quite onerous back in sort of May, June time. And we reported this committee on the 2nd of July as to what that initial setup looked like. So I won't go through the sort of mechanics of what it is, but 3.1 is just literally a recap as to what a tracer does and what an advisor does. The tracer takes those initial calls, and we'll talk about some numbers as we go through the report. And then the advisors do all the follow-up calls to ensure that person is self-isolating. They're aware that means and what they need to do in terms of self-isolation, and potentially going to test if required. So that generally sort of differentiates between contact tracers and contact advisors. For members' interests, we've currently got about 8 full-time equivalents doing the tracing work, about 28 in terms of the advisors, just to give you a bit of an idea of scale. The scale is something that our health boards and Public Health Wales are very interested in, because as we know, we're in a bit of a second peak. So in terms of preparedness for the winter months coming, we need to get to a certain level of staffing. So that's where we are now, with a view of stepping that up, and obviously that's modelled by health colleagues. So section 3 is really sort of where we're at in terms of what we do. 3.2, I think it's important to say that you may say, well, we don't seem to have many cases in Monmouthshire, which I'll pick up shortly. Why do you need so many people? Well, it's very much a mutual support model, so we've very much been instrumental in helping colleagues in Caerphilly, Blaenau, Gwent and Newport, particularly over the last month, where, as we know, there's been local lockdowns. So Monmouthshire is the only area in Monmouthshire, as members will know, that aren't currently, I don't think it's called a lockdown, it's a public health intervention or something along those lines. But we're the ones that within Gwent that aren't within those sort of particular lockdown measures that other areas of Gwent are. So that's very much taking up capacity of the TTP team is assisting others. So 3.4, just when we reported in July, we're literally setting up, getting used to the system, etc. And the case is very low. So even then we were helping out with, if members recall, back in June, the meat plant incidents up in North Wales. So we're happy to assist colleagues in North Wales, which is helpful really in terms of understanding the system. It's quite a complex system in terms of cases, hits what they call the CRM system, a queue, and then Monmouthshire pick up Monmouthshire resident cases. But obviously you can imagine all the cross-boundary issues that, we'll have people that are residents in Bryn Mawr and they'll actually work in Abergavenny and vice versa. So that close working with bordering counties is obviously essential for an effective system. 3.4 also does pick up that all our tracers are from an environmental health background, be they the Indigenous staff within Hugh and Jill's team. I think members probably know members of the environmental health team, plus we've taken on some to give us some extra capacity. So there's about 3.5 full-time equivalents now that environmental health background that aren't part of the general Monmouthshire team, but they're here with us to the end of March to deal with all the cases we're currently dealing with. So that's actually unique to Monmouthshire, and I think it's held us in very good stead, because environmental health are very much designed, if you like, to do that investigative work. It's a bit like an E. coli or salmonella outbreak. We're very in tune with what to look at, inquisitive minds as to where have you been, what have you done, have you been in taxis, what's your travel arrangements, etc. And that's been very key to get into things very early on. So that's something that is unique to Monmouthshire. Other authorities have taken on lay tracers, for want of a word, which are very often escalating things to environmental health. We've overcome that problem by having tracers being environmental health staff. So that sort of covers the numbers there, and then 3.6 gives a little bit of a snapshot. It's obviously changed quite significantly since we wrote this. We're on the 29th of September now, but that sort of generally gives you an idea across Wales of where we're pitched. You could say, well, RCT obviously got a lot more people in it. The top of the pops at the moment is Blaen y Gwent, with about 300 cases per 100,000 population. And that's probably a fairer representation to compare that currently. It's not in the report because it's literally today's news. We're 19th in that sort of league table if you look at number of cases per 100,000 population. So we're at 16. And like I say, Blaen y Gwent at the top of that table. They're over 300 currently, as reported in the news. So we're very much supporting those. If you look at 3.7, that mentions that earlier about the escalation other areas within Gwent, Caerphilly, Newport, and Blaen y Gwent particularly. And then the report in 3.7 refers to the fact we've traced 134 cases of COVID for other areas. So that's non-Monmouthshire residents. That's actually now 200. It's over 200. So the last 2 weeks we picked up another 70 odd for those neighbouring authorities. We've actually helped RCT as well because they've been struggling with getting people to trace early on, and that's fundamental to an effective system. In addition to those 200 that we're tracing outside of Monmouthshire, we've also taken on over 400 supplementary advisory calls for other districts, and they're also warn and inform. So if someone may have been to a particular pub, for example, we will make a call through the advisory team that Richard's managing to inform them that this, to be careful, you've been to premises that COVID's been identified, even if they're not necessarily contacts. Contact is a particular definition of being in contact with someone for a particular time. So if you waft past someone in Morrison's, that's not necessarily a contact. And I think that's also taken an awful lot of time from the teams to explain what is and what isn't issues that they need to be concerned about. There's obviously a lot of public concern around COVID, understandably. So 3.8 gives a bit of an update as to where we are in terms of that staff. So like I say, the latest says we are staffed in terms of tracers. We're still recruiting on the advisor front. I'll bring Richard in to add to the end of this chair when I get to the end. So 3.9 explains that certainly on the advisors front, we use a lot of redeployed staff, particularly in Richard's team in terms of library staff, hub, I think you call it now. Those hub staff obviously gone back to the substantive roles. So we're very much backfilling now that established team. That established team is very key though, so if we can flex up and flex down according to demand. So if we need to and things escalate, then potentially members in Richard's team and Cheryl's, etc., can flex back in to provide that advisory service. They're set up on the system. They can see the queues that come through, so that's ready and ready for anything that may come our way. So that sort of picks up 3.9. Finally, Chair, just in terms of equality and future gens, etc., obviously that national modelling does indicate that it does have a disproportionate effect on those BAME groups, and I know regionally there's particular focus on that in terms of engaging those community groups. The younger people, as we know, are much less likely to have severe symptoms, but are more likely to socially gather. Can be a particular issue, perhaps, in terms of 10 o'clock curfews. What happens next? The off license is shut, but the takeaways remain open potentially. And there are some issues there that we're liaising with the police on in terms of trying to manage that as best we can. Care homes, as we know, obviously key in terms of trying to protect our vulnerable groups. They've received priority, both in terms of environmental health intervention with those particular settings, plus also in terms of the testing regime. So they're tested regularly. The local council aren't doing the testing. That's obviously Aaron Bevan health colleagues deal with the testing side, but also that's instrumental to have an effective tracing system in place. So that also covers generally that sort of equality issue of trying to focus on the more risk groups across the council and wider. And then in terms of reasons that it says, it's hopefully helpful for members to be kept abreast of where we are in terms of contact tracing across the county. recognise the contribution of council staff. They are really certainly putting a shift in. Jill's team, for example, Jill's not here, but I know they've often done 12-hour days. They are working on weekends, so it's really helpful now to have some backfill in terms of some of the staff we brought in to assist in that process. The resource implications, this comes at a cost clearly. Anything that's outside of working hours is reclaimed through the Welsh Government's funding that's been set up for TTP. So that's now escalating, as obviously we've increased the numbers, which I mentioned earlier. The costs are going up, a lot of overtime payments as well. That's all being borne by Welsh Government. If it's okay, Chair, I'll hand over to Richard. He may just have some supplementaries just on the advisor front, and then back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, fine. Morning, Richard.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, just on the advisor front, I think it's a real testament to the sort of behaviour and values of our core staff in Monmouthshire, and just the attitude that our colleagues have displayed from back at the end of May coming into this space, coming from various substantive roles, taking on quite an interesting position, having very difficult conversations with people from not only inside Monmouthshire but across the Gwent region. They've performed remarkably well. A team of people I'm very proud of as someone who's leading it presently, to the point that we actually get in contact from neighbouring authorities asking for copies of our training notes, our scripts. And it's nothing that we do that's different from the training everyone else across the Gwent region has received as we started this process. I think what's important about the Monmouthshire team is when we started, we did start small, but a lot of the staff that we drew upon are from customer focused roles. So they're used to having conversations with members of the public about many interesting subjects. So to go into a space where you're discussing, potentially you've been in contact with someone who's COVID-19 positive, they're able to articulate things and use the script as a guide, but make it a very customer focused conversation. And that's enabled us to sort of just go into this space and to do something that's particularly tough, but to do it very well.
Okay. Thanks, Richard. Right, I've got members' questions. Firstly, I'd like to just thank the team and thank you, Dave and Richard and all the other members within your team for everything you're doing and all your hard work. And I'm sure everybody from the committee, I'm sure everybody in Monmouthshire at the moment, we're coping really well. But without you guys, it doesn't exist either, does it? So thanks, guys, and keep the good work going and the hard work as well. As you said, Dave, it's not easy sometimes. It's a hell of a challenge, I would think. Even watching Panorama last night, it can get really frustrating, perhaps. It doesn't go right, but you've got your good days as well, which probably get you through the bad days as well, in not making sure, that you want to do it in the following morning and not leave it like so. Yeah, thanks for all your hard work, guys, and I'm sure the leader of the council as well will be saying something on this because it's important. Ruth, I got Maureen and then Ruth. Maureen.
Yes, thank you. And I too want to offer my thanks to all the people that are involved in the hours they've been putting in. We are very much appreciative of it. What I wanted, following on from watching that programme last night, how much difficulty are they having in reaching the people when they try to trace them? Because it was frustrating, that poor one lady last night, she just couldn't get any reply from anybody. And, is it difficult, or are we managing to trace people?
Shall I come in first?
Yeah,
thanks. I think our rates, I haven't got them in front of me, unfortunately, but our rates are extremely high, in excess of 80%. And I think it's very different in Wales than it is in England. England, if you recall, PHE, Public Health England, decided to do it sort of privately through some sort of call centre arrangement. So hopefully what myself and Richard have articulated, we've done it very locally. So if you phone up about, I've been in Abergavenny, I went to Tesco Express, I went to Denzel's Taxi. People actually know, because we're dealing with the tracers of environmental staff that work in Abergavenny, so they'll know exactly what they're talking about.
Yes.
The advisor front, And I think that's that initial call is someone that understands. They're talking about Castle Meadow. They're talking about Chippenham Park in Monmouth. They're talking about the Vine Tree. They, so they're talking to people that know what they're talking about. So I think we haven't had that problem. Not to say it hasn't happened at all. Some people just perhaps won't even answer the call. But our rates, I can certainly provide that, Chair, if that's helpful. Yeah, it's reported quite regularly, but our levels are very high. And I think that's key, is the differences between England and Wales. So England has, Wales, has very much gone down the Environmental Health Local Authority line. And we've managed to utilise our own staff with those skills to deal with that demand. So I think it's been really successful across Wales.
Good, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I got Ruth and then Louise.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, Richard, and all your team. They're doing sterling work, and we're relying a great deal on them. One thing that did concern me, obviously, it's mainly in restaurants. I don't know if you sign anything when you go into public house. I haven't been into one. But can people, sort of sway the authorities, really, by giving a false name and address, telephone number, etc.? Have they no means of showing identity with a license or passport would be helpful? As some have said, they've known people sort of be bogus then. And I'll give all my questions now if I can, David. That the children's having tests, sometimes they're saying there's too many children being tested, but they're not allowed into school if they've got a cough until they've had a test, as my own daughter had, and granddaughter actually, coughing this morning, and she was told to go to Newtown, Bilth or Ebervale from Raglan. It's such a shame that we haven't got a testing place in Monmouthshire, as on the news this morning we had the person from Neville Hall speaking, and the interviewer was saying about all being locked down around you, which gave a bad impression really for people to think in Monmouthshire, are we in lockdown? And another thing, when you mentioned sort of wafting by someone, I thought the guideline was that you would have to be sort of in close contact with somebody for about 15 minutes to sort of make you query whether you have been in direct contact with somebody. And also looking at the news, they put very, very heavy emphasis on the track and trace, assuming that everybody has got these phones and able to do so. I think that comes across in areas which are perhaps in London or whatever, but a lot of people don't even get signals out where I live anyway. So I think we need more and more emphasis on, some other means as well, but I don't know how you'd answer that. Anyway, thank you all very much. Sorry for all the questions, Dave, but I thought I'd get off in one go. Thank you.
Okay, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Edwards. I jotted them down as you went through. So in terms of that information at restaurants, then that is a requirement. So there's a legal requirement to hold that information. Some now are QR codes, that's quite effective. And in fact, Abergwenny Fairgrounds, which hasn't been mentioned yet, they actually had QR codes, so they're asking people to use it. So it is a legal requirement to put that in. We're doing proactive visits to make sure that people are doing that. It is difficult, Councillor Edwards, if someone puts a false mobile number down. I think, again, we have done sort of publicity, not just ourselves, Public Health Wales, etc., to emphasise the importance of this, and that's very much been the communication channel, isn't it, in terms of we need to be sensible, relay information that's relevant to the authorities and not be obstructive. And there's been very few cases of people being obstructive. Newport have had a few, and the police were going to intervene in those rare cases. So restaurants certainly should be. In terms of children being tested, we're certainly liaising with the schools directly. Sometimes it's too much because the slight sniff and they're going off to be tested. It's causing a real problem then for those people that legitimately need to go to testing, and it's causing a problem. But just to say on the children testing thing, that's certainly done as a priority as and when people have got symptoms, but there is this sort of mix up with people that aren't necessarily got COVID symptoms, but they're tootling off to get tested anyway. Testing locations is a real issue. We flagged that with, as I said in my piece, that is the health board's responsibility to ensure testing stations are there and ready to go. I think people are testing through the arranging testing through the UK portal, and that does tend to send you in all directions. It's something that's been regularly reported regionally, and it's flagged as an issue, not just the locations. There is one in Cwm, which is probably a bit closer for those residents in the north, and obviously Rodney Parade in Newport. But what they're doing is tending to prioritise some of these cluster events. So what you're finding is individual cases that aren't deemed to be a priority are being pushed back. Hence, can you go to Newtown, which is unhelpful. I think they're trying to work through that. I think there's a real peak in terms of testing, and that's causing real strain. We can certainly feed that back. It has been fed back before, Councillor Edwards, in terms of can that be more streamlined and more user-friendly for the people going for testing. I know that other councillors have approached me on that very point, and what I'm doing is referring them back to the health board. So I'll certainly refer those to them. As you say, if you news broadcasts tend to say South East Wales and South Wales are in lockdown. We're not in Monmouthshire, so that is very much the case. I mentioned the figures earlier. Ours is around the 6, was it 12, I think, what did I say earlier? 16, sorry, per 100,000. It's nowhere near the trigger point where Welsh Government intervene and say you need to implement a local lockdown. So it's certainly not the case. We're nowhere near that currently. It changes day by day, but the current position is we're not part of that South East Wales issue of local lockdowns. And then in terms of, you mentioned when's a contacted contact. If you're within 1 metre of someone for 1 minute, that is a contact. So you could be at a particular place, where that contact is in place, but that depends on people not wearing PPE, etc. And then it's 2 metres for 15 minutes. So obviously the further distance, you'd have to be in close contact for longer periods of time. So when we do that tracing, that's something that we're asking, have you been in contact with that member of staff? Tea breaks, coffee breaks, for example, travelling to work together in cars, that's when often you trigger into a contact. So it's not wafting and past strangers on the pavement. It's very much, there's a bit of science behind it, that you become a contact in those sort of environments I mentioned. So I think, yeah, the smartphone's one. I think 10 million people I hear have subscribed across the UK, and it doesn't replace TTP. So for those, and my mother's 87, she hasn't got a smartphone, and she's not going to be anytime soon downloading an app. I mean, just those very words would fill her with fear. So for her, that system still works in terms of if she did become a contact, she'd be contacted by the local authority, and she'd be talked through that process through people in Richard's team. So that is covered off. So it's not it doesn't replace everything. And again, the app and the tracing, the testing is all with health, and those issues have been reported through to Aneurin Bevan and Public Health Wales.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, David. But I do know that when my daughter applied then for a test first thing this morning, like Newtown or Bilth was quite a long way away. But perhaps the closer ones you see now that you can't get a slot for days. So that was the first one she could get. So that's the one that she took up. Because it's it's the time of year when all the children are starting back in school with coughs and colds, and she's not particularly worried because she doesn't think that she's been in any contact. But then the school won't allow her back in if she's coughing until she's had a test.
I know it's a real dilemma, Councillor Edwards, and I think what's happening, isn't it, that Abersychan's got a station, Cwm, obviously Caerphilly got a walk-in station. What's happening is, because Blanagwent, only dealing with 300 cases, they're prioritising those local clusters.
Yeah.
Those individual cases, unfortunately, are being pushed across. I think there's one that said go to Carmarthen. I mean, it is ludicrous, really, there's an assumption that people got cars, and that's the wrong assumption in many cases. So it is recognised, and that's been reported. So certainly,
I just hope it's a quick turnaround for the result as well, not have to wait days that they're off school. That's the thing with a lot of the children now. Absolutely. Thank you, David, for that explanation of it all. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. What turnaround would you expect, Dave, with something like that for somebody in Monmouthshire nowadays, having to travel out and then it goes down to wherever it goes, down to the testing centre, to the labs? What's the turnaround now at the moment? Have you any ideas?
So sometimes it's very rapid, it can be 24 hours. So I think they're prioritising care homes. There have been some difficulties. They're prioritising residents in care homes, not so much the staff. So we had a couple of difficulties with staff, perhaps 3-4 days delay. So that's poor because it's causing a problem, very much like the school scenario that Councillor Edwards explained. That caused a real staffing problem. They can't do anything until the test results comes back, and the contacts are also self-isolating. So there's a real knock-on, isn't it, in terms of rotas, etc. So that can be really difficult. It can vary really between 24 hours and 5-6 days in times. So that's unacceptable, the 5-6 days one. And I think there's a real struggle within Gwent because they are dealing with these specific clusters.
Okay.
So again, that's reported back to Aaron Bevan. They're very aware of the situation. They're doing what they can to sort of speed that as best they can.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about people paying for their own tests as well, isn't there? A lot of people have been paying for their own tests. Is that right?
I'm not so sure what's happening. I'm sure you're right, Councillor Howarth. I'm not quite so sure what's happening on the private side. Obviously, we deal with the NHS provision, but I'm sure you're right. Yes.
Does that step into you though? Let's say somebody has a private test and then they all of a sudden then they test positive. Let's say they've got to get that then gets forward to the board, does it? And then that comes back to you.
Yeah. Basically, there's a filter system that should pick up everything. So when we talk about TTP, that's stuff in terms of community spread. So, for example, if people are contracting it within Neville Hall, that's dealt with entirely by an Aaron Bevan. So they deal with the track and trace themselves. It makes sense, doesn't it? They've got people who deal with measles outbreaks, etc. So we don't see everything, but certainly everything should come through in terms of St. Cadoc's do the filter, and they should get all the test results to get a grasp of exactly what's happening. The thing that's a bit different now is Lighthouse Labs. Members have probably heard of that through the media. Those are private labs, but it is the NHS contracting it through those Lighthouse Labs. So it is actually still the NHS mechanism, if you like. It's just the sheer demand has caused them to go out privately to meet that testing demand. But yeah, to answer your question, that should all come through centrally and filter through then to TTP teams.
Okay. Right, I've got Louise and then Sheila and then Martin. Louise?
Thank you. I've got a number of questions. I think one of the things is that you've mentioned about the idea of the need for sort of mobile testing because of the fact that some people haven't got cars, and obviously care homes are easier to get to, but there are carers that go out into the community, and obviously that causes a staffing issue if people are off and the tests aren't quick. The second question I got was really a general one in terms of whether public health are going to feed into planning and the lessons learned from this pandemic, because in my opinion the reason why Monmouthshire is doing well is because we're a rural county, and we haven't got the same density of populations as other areas, which causes it easier for a virus to spread. And I've noticed that the National Development Framework, which is being laid in Senedd for the next 60 days, the draft of that talks about increasing the density of housing in towns. It also suggests 50 houses per hectare, whereas the norm is 30. So it's actually suggesting that we build in a way that will increase public health risks, and I think, and also that villages, instead of the development being proportionate and reasonable, we want vibrant areas, which again increases the density of the population. And I just wondered whether or not there should be some input from public health in relation to these new ideas of packing everybody into densely populated areas, which actually increases the likelihood of the virus spreading. I did download the NHS app, and it did say that we were in a medium risk area because of the fact that we were close to other areas. But I really do believe that the reason why Monmouthshire has fared better is really because of its rural nature. And I think, you know, to destroy that rural nature nationwide by planning proposals isn't a good idea. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Just in terms of a couple of questions there, in terms of mobile testing, they're set up according to demand, so could fairly rapidly put one in their leisure centre, just to make, and Penalta, I think, as well, in terms of meeting that local demand. So if and when, heaven forbid, something happens in one of our towns, they would rapidly provide that mobile testing station. That is very much about those people that can't drive necessarily large distances to get to places. So that's very much demand driven. So if and when we did have clusters, then or significant incidents, then the mobile testing would be implemented rapidly by health colleagues. Agency carers are covered, so the likes of Q Care and other providers. There'd be a big gap in it if we missed the peripatetic workers, so they're very much part of it in terms of ensuring that they're tested and not, accidentally, they're regularly tested. Because of those early days, there were some cases of that incidental spread before they picked up on the agency staff. So that's very much something that's picked up specifically. In terms of the planning inputs, I can certainly have a conversation with Mark Hand on that. I know Public Health are keen to be more involved, both in planning and licensing applications. So I just relay your comments to Mark for his information. But I think, yes, indeed, I think you're right. It's not a surprise that Blackburn, Leicester, some of the city centres were affected because of the density of, I remember some guy saying, I'm going back to a terraced house. There's 18 of us living in the same house. Fortunately, we're not to my knowledge, do we have that position within Monmouthshire. But it is a point of trying to be proactive and keeping on the front foot. So I accept that point, and I'll certainly refer that to planning colleagues.
Yeah, it's the draft National Development Framework, which is laid in Senate at the moment, and it was laid on the 21st of September, and there's 60 days for Assembly members to consider it. And, I think they're just, and that'll be nationwide across Wales. And I think the public health side of, building housing in too dense a way really does need to be considered on a public health basis. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Louise. Sheila.
Thank you, Chairman. And can I pass on my thanks to David, Richard, and your teams. You've worked tirelessly, and it's very, very reassuring to know that you've adapted so quickly to this emergency and what you're doing. I have a couple of questions. First of all, about the care homes. I picked up a bit of. I wanted to ask you how reassured you are with the testing and what's. I know the United Bevan Health Board are doing it regularly, as you said, but I did pick up a bit of a concern about the turnaround time for these tests. Is there any way that we can help with this if we, express, if our chairman picks it up and takes it up, and we can sort of note our concerns that we think this testing should be carried out more quickly? And the second question is really about your ability and your capacity and the funding that you need to keep this work going as it is. I mean, obviously the Welsh Government, as you put in the report, providing the resources for the additional workload of the team. But I'm just concerned, Ruth's point about children being tested, if every child that has a sniffle is tested before it can go back to school, and the additional workload on your department because of all the feedback from these tests. We're in the second wave. I just want to know if there's anything we can do to help you with that with regard to making our views known about. We think you really do need to have the resources, and I thank you once again.
Thank you, Councillor Woodhouse. In terms of the first points, yeah, I mean, certainly care homes had a big priority, as you know, with the first peak. And to be honest, I think it's been prioritised in terms of those that there have been cases. I think and sometimes the detriment of the proactive testing. So it is happening, certainly. So we've got a number of care homes, obviously within Monmouthshire. The proactive testing is still happening, but I think it's been done through a portal arrangement, and those delays can sometimes be 4 or 5 days, which is unhelpful. So certainly I go to a regional meeting 3 times a week. So with the chair's agreement, I'm happy to feed that back, that this committee have had a report today. They're very concerned about that issue of care homes testing. Can we ensure that that continues to be a priority going forward? We don't think this is going away anytime soon. So I think that'd be helpful. So with the chairman's agreement, I can see your chair nodding. I'm happy to email my health colleagues, certainly copy in Councillor Howarth, and that'll be helpful.
Yeah, that'll be fine, Dave. No problem.
Yeah, great, thank you, Councillor. So on the second point, then, in terms of funding, I think it is an arrangement that takes us to the 31st of March. Certainly, if things are carrying on, we've got no crystal ball. I'm sure that Welsh Government will have to come in on the white horse and continue to fund that. We can't just say, well, actually, from the 1st of April, everything's okay because the funding stopped. There'll have to be a contingency to deal with that issue. There's a particular issue with schools in terms of being ultra cautious, and someone's got a slight sniffle and they're going off to the testing system. And you're going to get a whole raft of sniffles and coughs, aren't you, particularly this time of year. That is a real difficulty. So all we can do really is feed that back. I mean, it is about communication and working with the schools to try and for that not to happen. It's a difficult one because parents are very concerned, teachers are concerned, you can imagine why. And it's very difficult. It can wipe out entire year groups because you can't bubble them up necessarily conveniently. So it does have a real impact, as you've stated in Councillor Edwards. So again, I'll just feed that back to the health process, because as I say, they're wholly responsible for the testing side of things, as to what can be done in terms of comms to our schools and other settings to try and reduce that burden. So I'll certainly take that forward as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Happy with that, Sheila? Yes.
Yes, indeed. I am concerned about the situation with the schools, because we do need to make sure our children are safe and parents are confident enough to be able to send the children to school. But the extra testing will need to be, accommodated and looked after, because that is so important. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the long term for schools is a worry, i.e. How long it goes on for now for the next 6 months with the sniffles or whatever. I just said to the committee prior, I mean, how many kids have got the Calpol or parents got the Calpol in the bathrooms or whatever, like with the children. Yeah, I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? So this time of year is very funny time for that. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just add my comments to those of other councillors. I'm absolutely in awe at the work that you and your team have done over the last few months, and we all owe you a great debt of thanks. I'd like to carry on with a couple of very quick questions about the education theme. Now we've moved on to that. The first thing, I think I heard an answer to this, but I'd just like it clarified, please. It's around the advisor team and the report saying that the majority are now returning to substantive posts, and this at a time when there is a very substantial second wave developing. Are those people able to rejoin the advisor team if we do get overwhelmed with a second wave? Because obviously they developed that expertise early on. And the second point, absence from schools. I serve on 2 school governing bodies, and it is a problem at the moment. We had a report at King Henry, which is one of my schools, a couple of nights ago, and the head there saying that at the moment attendance is 90% among the kids, whereas this time last year it was virtually 98%. So some of those are children who will be genuinely concerned, waiting for the results of tests and so on. But in both of the schools I'm concerned with, we do have a proportion of youngsters who are not in school because their parents are perhaps over worried, over concerned about the risk their children face, and they're being kept away from school. Now, I think all the evidence and all the experts are suggesting that at the moment, if it's possible, the best place for kids is in school, learning socially as well as academically with their peers. And I was wondering if there was room here for you and staff in your teams to work with education welfare, who can visit families where parents are unnecessarily keeping their children away from school, so that as many children as possible at the moment are in school, and the sort of anxiety that is in a sense unfounded can be overcome. Thanks.
Richard?
Shall I pick up on the first part in regards to staffing and sort of our ability to flex up in the event of the second wave that appears to be hitting us sort of becoming more substantial, and especially in the Monmouthshire region? At the moment, we have got circa 16 members of staff. Some of those are still redeployed from their substantive roles, for example, from the Borough Theatre. They're providing very much the backbone of our service at the moment. They're long-standing colleagues that have been in TTP since the end of May. The other members of staff, for example, that are pulled from my corner of the world and the community hubs, what we've done as part of our contingency planning going forwards is ensuring they're still picking up circa 4 hours a week within TTP, because it's a very dynamic space. Protocols change regularly. So they're keeping their hand in a very quiet way almost, but it gives us the confidence that if we do have to scale up, demand is there. We've got trained members of staff who are sort of abreast of all the current policies, protocols, etc., to enable us to mobilise greater numbers to meet the demand should it be there.
Thanks, Richard. In terms of the second aspect, in terms of absence from schools, very valid points. Certainly in Vampel field, an awful lot of direct calls from schools, and we liaise as best we can, obviously, with the education departments to have a consistent message. Yes, unnecessarily, parents excluding their kids from school is a real concern. I know that Will McLean and his team are obviously keeping abreast of that. So yeah, certainly we need to link, perhaps as you say, with that education welfare arm. I mean, it is a capacity issue for us, but be assured as and when we get concerns both from schools direct plus parents. So we are a bit of a conduit for everyone really at this time, and that's why the capacity is a real issue for us. We're getting calls from everywhere. We do very much encourage people in terms of entering those safe environments, but you're right in saying that parents can be over worried, excluding them unnecessarily, and that's a real concern. So I take your points, and certainly we'll work as closely as we can. I know we are currently, I think probably Environmental Health colleagues attend at least 2 or 3 meetings weekly with educational colleagues directly on where we are now. How do we encourage people? How do we improve the comms to encourage and cajole parents to act appropriately? But it is a very real issue, and certainly that's a national problem as well. So we'll certainly take that forward and do the best we can in the circumstances. So valid comments, thank you.
Dave, may I just ask, the schools are Key Stage 3 schools upwards, so we have got nobody in a position there which liaises with them 4 schools, not from your department, within the welfare side, who said, right, I will take these under the umbrella and individual and say, right, let's have a look now. Where are we with Caldecott? Where are we in Monmouth, Abergavenny, whatever? I mean, we've got nobody in a position there from the education side on welfare who's taking that, then can come back to you guys then within where we are with that, instead of you guys having to dip in and dip out because you've got that many other things to be getting on with. Sure, the education department of Monmouthshire County Council should have somebody who could let's say, take an overall umbrella of them 4 schools, especially the larger schools, the Key Stage 3 upwards schools. No, we haven't adopted that. No.
I'm not completely clear. I'll certainly relay that to Will McLean. So that's another action I've jotted down here. But
That
certainly,
can't be hard though. I just can't believe that they're allowing you to take that on when actually such, and Martin's made the point, it's so important that, but to just focus, if we had 20, 30 schools, different ballgame, but to have them 4 schools above Key Stage 2 for me is, and they are important. The other schools, as we know, the Key Stage 1 and 2s, they will be in and out all the time, i.e. what Ruth said there with the colds and coughs and all these things. But the bigger schools, the Key Stage 3 upwards schools, surely we've not let that go like that, have we? I can't understand that one.
I think I'm not fully familiar. My colleague Dan Thomas, I know, has been the HO dealing directly with education, so there might be more going on than I'm aware of, Councillor Howarth, but
Okay.
certainly I'll check on that. But yeah, it is an issue, but basically they'll phone in Environmental, so it's very hard to control that, isn't it? You know, I'm a parent, King Henry VIII, and we say, well, we know that PHW, you know, Health have been in contact with secondary schools direct. That's, and we've been involved as well. That's the spreadsheet. This is what to do if you've got someone who's got sniffles. They don't need to be excluded. So we're trying to be very clear as the advice given to both schools and parents. But inevitably, they're going to ring up anyway. So it is a difficult one, but it does cause some capacity issues where you're forever fielding the same type of question.
I know.
But yeah, I take your point. If there's some sort of mechanism to try and encourage it better through educational welfare rather than as that's your point, then certainly we'd welcome that. I'll certainly have a conversation with Kath Saunders and other colleagues in education.
Okay, thanks. Right, I've got a last one from Maureen. Maureen?
Yes, it's not a question. I just looked on the app, and I think Monmouthshire varies throughout, because if you're NP7, which is the north up in Abergavenny, it's low. And I think some areas in Monmouthshire may be medium because they're closer to the danger areas. So it's looking good at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Right, thanks, Dave. Thanks to the team. And you're with us for the second report now, yes?
Yeah, just before that, just take this forum to thank Richard for managing this advisory team. It's just been quite a task in terms of rotating staff for what will be. It's currently up to 77 hours a week. It will soon be 84 hours a week. So that takes quite a headache. So I'd just like to take this opportunity through you, Chair, to thank Richard, because he himself is going back to his substantive post. So we're going to have to pick up that baton. But Richard's done a fantastic job, and I just wanted to use this opportunity to thank Richard. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, that's great. Well done, everyone, and thanks, Richard, and thanks to your team, to everyone. We had that at the start there, didn't we? We know you're doing a wonderful job, and everybody in Monmouthshire. Big thanks to you all, you guys. Okay, let's get into the agenda item number 6 there, the public protection aspects of where we are now with the last 6 months from COVID in March through to now. Dave, you just want to run through that with us? Very comprehensive, and thanks again for your report, and thanks again to the team as well, because every time I speak to you guys, you pull from pillar to post, and this is another one as well. So let's hope the post doesn't break. Let's keep going. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So this one, it won't be, you'll also hear from Linda and Gareth, so my dulcet tones, hopefully I'm not annoying councillors, but basically I will run you through to 3.3, because environmental health colleagues, it's the nature of the job. They're so flat out, they can't attend this meeting, unfortunately, so that applies to HUO, and that many councillors will know as well. So I'll cover the initial report and the environmental health aspects, then I'll hand over to Linda for 3.4, which talks about licensing. Gareth will talk you through 3.5 and 3.6, and then I'll just come in at the end then just to conclude that. And then obviously, as usual, Chair, we're happy to take any questions. So we won't go through this verbatim, but this is sort of the detail, if you like, in terms of numbers. And so, you know, what has been the response beyond the CTP aspect, if you like. So it's hopefully giving you a bit of a snapshot over a 6-month period as to what's been the impact on what is a busy team. Some members here I know have or were on Strong Communities Select, and that's been the forum that we've reported through public protection performance on an annual basis. So that's very much numbers based, isn't it, in terms of the number of noise complaints, the number of drainage problems, rat infestations, food inspections, scams. I could go on, can I? The licensing visits that Linda and the team make, etc. So hopefully members are fairly au fait with what the teams provide. We're talking about environmental training standards and licensing. So the recommendations will be to inform members of a more detailed understanding of what we've done as a response directly to COVID. So we're not talking about stuff that we do anyway. This is over and above the day job, if you like. And also that issue of, which I probably touched upon in the first report, is trying to prioritise the more vulnerable, be it the elderly and others that are particularly vulnerable in the face of a pandemic that we're currently in. So that's the purpose of the report, Chair. And then in terms of 3.2, just quickly, this is Jill Dickin manages the commercial team. So it's one and the same team that I spoke about earlier in terms of the tracers. So there's been overlap here. So inevitably we're commenting on the TTP work, but I won't cover that again because we covered it in the first report. But it is, I think it's interesting to look at some of the figures, and that over 300 hours of TTP work over and above what they do anyway. And that was July and August. September has really escalated. So the numbers have really gone through the roof in terms of our TTP support. So yes, the advice continues to both businesses and the public, and that is quite an onerous task because of the sheer diversity of what people are asking in terms of the intricacies of the COVID regulations that come from Welsh Government. 323 picks up the fact that this additional support to others, which I think we spoke about earlier, myself and Richard in the first report. And that figure there, for example, the 134 for non-Monmouthshire residents is now over 200. So that's how it changes from the time of writing to the time of presenting. The last 2 weeks, we picked up another 70 cases on behalf of other Gwent residents to support that mutual support arrangement with the Gwent authorities, and the advisory calls have escalated beyond 400 to the non-Monmouthshire residents again. So the workload has been significant. So in terms of 324, that's Jill's team just reflecting on the sort of stuff they've done over and above the day job, if you like. And it is about the COVID in care homes has been quite a task, and it's not just the cases, it's been proactive in terms of regular contact with all our care homes together with the commissioning team. Plus, the question and answer forums we do on a regular basis, again, for care providers. And we do that also. We've done a couple of very successful cases, which Linda may touch upon, for businesses. Because the regulations have changed, isn't it? We're on lockdown. No, you're not. You're in the beer garden. Yes, you are. No, you're not. You're on the pavement. You can come inside. You can imagine that had a whole tranche of questions. So it's been very variable, and we've tried to keep abreast. Well, we have kept abreast of all those changes that come through from the coronavirus restrictions regulations. So that's been quite a task, and hopefully totally pick up Councillor Brown's point about we are rural and we're fortunate. But I'd like to think also, because of the proactive stance we have taken, that also has an impact as well in terms of keeping our cases down. So we like to think that some of the proactive work that the teams have been engaged with has had an impact as well. Key worker accommodation is one of those things where it was an exemption. Obviously, you couldn't rock up to hotels, etc. during the full lockdown. There was an exemption for key workers and homeless people, so we were key in authorising that accommodation through Environmental to ensure that accommodation was available for emergencies. Legionella advice: if people have not used the premises for 3 months, you got stagnant water in pipes. So we're very proactive in terms of making sure that an unintended consequence of a lockdown could be that you have legionellosis kicks off. So we've been very proactive with pubs, bars, not so much the chains, they should know their own procedures well, but certainly little free houses, etc. We've been very proactive in terms of giving advice and guidance. I won't go through each one, Chair. Events is something, I mean, it's just a bullet point, but you wouldn't believe the time and effort that's gone into that in terms of ensuring that events do not proceed has been the key thing. during the times of a pandemic, most of them are illegal because of the gatherings of over 30 people outside. So there's very few exceptions to that. One would be elite sports. So there have been a couple of horse racing events at Chepstow, but that's an elite sport that is exempt. I think someone's playing Space Invaders, I think, in the background, but I'll carry on, Chair. So the event side has been very busy, is an understatement, really. So, you know, stopping horse riding events and golf tournaments, etc. So we speak to these organisers to say, in the current circumstances, we consider that to be a mass gathering. You also may be encouraging people toing and froing from lockdown areas, and for those reasons, with police support, we advise them do not proceed. And generally, 9 times out of 10, they're perfectly accepting of that, and they advertise the fact it's been cancelled, and that those few exceptions generally come round to our way of thinking when we threaten them with a police presence that may turn around people, participants and spectators that may turn up to what would be an illegal event. So that's been quite onerous. There are a couple of exemptions I won't give you. Fairgrounds, car boot sales, etc. are actually exempt. So again, that causes a bit of confusion for the public, and we feel that as best we can. So that's generally a very whistle-stop tour of some of the stuff that Jill's team's been involved with. And then we've got some figures in 325, which shows that net increase, you know. So I think, as I stated earlier, the reports to Strong Communities identify the fact that we're busy anyway, pre-COVID. So COVID's obviously escalated it somewhat higher again. So Jill's team alone has seen a 45% increase in complaints. So that's something we're trying to manage as best we can, hence the people putting real shifts in to just cover the actual workflow that's coming through. So on to Hugh's team then, Hugh Owen and his what we call the public health team. They deal with the domestic side of environmental health. Again, they see an increase of 19%, but again, I know councillors on this committee will know many of the people in that team. It is the people like Mike Richardson, Anthony Davis, Hugh himself, and they do tend to be flat out the best of the time. So a 20% increase on top of being flat out isn't particularly helpful. And again, if you think about the fact that this is a virus that attacks, obviously affects breathing, etc. The fact the smoke nuisance went up considerably wasn't helpful, and almost a 3-fold increase. So you think, well, it doesn't sound particularly significant, but actually, if you're being asked to self-isolate because you've been in contact with a COVID case, it's probably unhelpful that your neighbour's burning his rubbish in his back garden. So again, we've got to them very quickly to say, look, there's a pandemic on. You can't be burning all your garden stuff in the garden, because that's creating a smoke and problems for sufferers within these areas. So we've been very proactive in terms of getting to them as quickly as we can and establishing that they should not be doing that in the circumstances. Unfortunately, fly tipping's gone up. Probably think there's less people about. The police are flat out. Let's chuck a few mattresses and wardrobes and all those. So unfortunately, that's increased, as have rats and mice. So those total service requests on Hugh's side have increased, as I say, by 19%. And he adds on there licensing holiday caravan sites. So again, we've had to make contact with them. Most of them have voluntarily agreed to close. Those that do remain open, it depends where they're coming from. So I know the news, you had people from Caerphilly going to Treco Bay, and the police did a blitz, I think, in Treco Bay, Porthcawl, to say, well, actually, you're in a lockdown area, you can't roll up in your caravan. To Treco Bay, which, as it happens, is also now in a lockdown area. So we've been very proactive in terms of advising that the whole holiday sites as well, which have been very, very helpful and compliant actually in terms of the COVID restrictions. So, and also we got a few there to help Jill's team in terms of the TTP tracing as well. So on that, Chair, if I hand over to Linda to just talk you through, hopefully in a summary fashion, section 3.4. Thank you.
Cheers, Dave. Thanks. Good morning, Linda.
Good morning. Thank you, Dave, for that. Yeah, I just want to echo Dave's points, really, is that we are a small team in licensing. We've got 4 full-time equivalent of staff. And we still doing the everyday job as well, you know, so we still got committees, we still got all the application processes. And I could go on for hours, to be honest, on the work that licensing actually do within the team, dealing with various sort of forms of licenses. But with regard to the COVID and this report, we've had to strive really to keep those businesses running, those license holders, to get information out to them basically. And it's been evolving really. As soon as sort of Welsh Government says to us that there's some sort of form of change, then we have to sort of get that message out as quickly as possible. So looking at the report, it gives you a quick snapshot of the type of work that we had to do really. Towards the end of March, when all the pubs and clubs closed, then obviously we had to get that message out, and we had to do spot checks as well to ensure sort of compliance as well, that people weren't opening up. And we had quite a number of complaints coming through where people have said they were like using beer gardens and various things like that. So we had to follow up those complaints as well. So it's not just the licensed trade as well. When they had the lockdown, they were able to do takeout food. So we had to check, was the license permissions allowing them to do that, and sort of make changes and give advice on that. But it's not just the licensed premises like pubs and clubs, it's the taxi trade as well, which, you know, is a vital sort of service really to the community. And they were transporting essential workers at that time. So we had to keep them on board by sort of thinking outside the box really for those who are currently licensed that would do medicals and various sort of safeguarding training, that we sort of put other measures in place to keep them going. Like the delay in MOT testing, sort of we allowed vehicles to sort of have that delay in line with DVSA. So it was things like that, and getting them sanitizers. And you had some who, when they did start to sort of trickle back into work, wanted us, if they wanted to have screens in their vehicle, how they would go about it. So we did active work throughout Wales really to make sure if they do put screens in, that they are safe for the driver and for passengers. So if there is an impact, there is a number of things that we are doing behind the scenes as soon as we get sort of changes on board from Welsh Government, and to keep it sort of more proactive, keep it going really. And we got the message out to the pubs and clubs when changes were made by doing a question and answer session as well through Teams. It was the first time that when Teams was sort of new to us all, but we felt that we had to get the key messages out, and we were thanked greatly by the pub trade and the restaurant trade for taking part in that and giving that guidance out. And like I said, the report so goes on to sort of say things like, you know, the changes on when pubs and clubs were allowed to reopen outdoors. So a lot of premises didn't have that capacity to go outdoors. So we had to work with highways then to start to introduce the pavement licenses. And then there were changes in government, what is required of licensed premises to enable them to trade in the pavement sort of element. So we got to make sure they comply with that element and do what is required of them legally as well. And, you know, it's been a very steep and quick learning curve really for licensing to sort of put new measures in place, put new ways of thinking, get the message out there. And we've thanked comms no end really for doing that and helping us really sort of updating websites, doing Twitter, you know, sort of getting things out there. And very often we have to sort of think outside the box as well, really. I mean, recently with the NHS app, which is used really for venues for people to sort of do with the QR reader going in, which doesn't sort of take away the TTP sort of side of it. We did think and ask when we had the training on that is, could we use it for Hackney vehicles, for them to have a QR reader unique to their vehicle? And they said yes, because one of the flaws really is that if you book a private hire vehicle, they got your records, they got your name, they got your contact details. When you hail a cab on the street, they don't have those records. So we decided then to send out to the trade, please display the QR reader so that if somebody goes in, they can just swipe it and say, well, actually, that's the vehicle I used that I hailed on the street on. So it's thinking of new ways of working. And this, like I said, report highlights just a quick snapshot of the stuff that we do. We actively involved in reopening town centres, to sort of work with the trade to sort of get people sort of the footfall there. And then when we have sort of lockdowns and various changes like masks being worn and various other things, we get that message out. So like I said, I could go on for hours really. So I'd like to thank you really for having this opportunity really to speak at some of the work that licensing do.
Yes, thanks, Linda. And from myself and from all the committee, and probably from everyone within Monmouthshire, we just thank you for your time and all your hard work you're doing, because without you guys as well, you know, we wouldn't be able to manage. And same as Dave's team, you all cross over and link together, and it is important that without you, you know, we would be in a very precarious position. That's every probably county in Wales. Look as it. We're okay at the moment, and but it's a long journey, 6 months. Who would have thought we're going back probably to step one again? Who knows? But hopefully we can keep it under wraps. And without you guys, that's impossible to do. So thanks, guys, and I'm sure members and the council will say that many times as well. So I will take questions now on your briefing supplement report. Have you got any members any questions? Sorry, Dave, you can come back in. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Can we just Gareth would do a very quick whistle stop of training standards, animal health, the
Yep.
3, 5, 3, 6 sections. So after that, Chair, I think the three of us would be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Gareth, step in, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, just quickly through the last bit, because obviously you've got it there in front of you. And again, to echo what's been said already, I think, you know, within trading standards as a team, you know, there's only 4 on the trading standards side. 2 of those have been sort of fully allocated to COVID. I say fully, alongside trying to pick up other priorities, but supporting the colleagues with the tests and tracing, as well as dealing with the various inquiries coming in. And as Dave mentioned, you know, the focus as usual is on the high risk elements, the vulnerable people. The scams haven't stopped. In fact, we've had scams as a result of COVID, which, you know, is despicable. And obviously we got animal disease control, which is the last thing we need now is an outbreak in animal disease. So again, key bits of work. The table shows you, unfortunately, sorry, I haven't updated the dates on the top there, but the first figure is for March 2019 through to the end of August. And as you can see, for the equivalent with the second figure, we've had an increase in 51%. And again, most of them are down to COVID and picking up inquiries on behalf of our colleagues. The business advice has been quite important as well, because again, as we saw early in the outbreak, there were supply chain issues. You know, there was great demand for products, and unfortunately, again, people take advantage of that, and you had people, some genuinely trying to provide a good service and diversifying into areas which they don't normally deal with. And of course, that brings along the complications then about the fact that they might not necessarily know the ins and outs of the law behind that. So that brought along some particular instances, especially in relation to sort of hand sanitizer and the requirements behind that. Again, not something we experienced on our own. This is across the country. And also with PPE, exactly the same happening with that as well. So we ended up getting quite a few bits tested, and resulted in some of the product that we actually had for staff internally needing to be withdrawn and recalled. If we can move just a bit further down, 3.5, 3.6, I think, you know, I've highlighted there some of the scams. Again, a lot of them are picking up on common approaches that you have without COVID. They just put in a COVID twist on it. But again, you know, when people are vulnerable, that's the time when often, you know, lapse in concentration can lead to vulnerable people becoming victims, and obviously the knock-on effects with that as well.
Yes.
Quickly, yeah.
Sorry, Gareth. Yep, carry on.
Quickly touching on the animal health side. Again, whilst the animal health side haven't been so much involved, they've obviously picked up relevant bits at market where the market continued to operate all the way through, and then there were some further restrictions with regards to types of sales that are initially allowed to take, and obviously they put measures in place to try and control the people that were present. But as I'm sure you realise, you know, the market is a different place and it's different to your supermarkets and other businesses. So again, it's something slightly different to deal with. But particularly with animal health, you know, we've got 3 members of staff now, 2.4 full-time equivalents, but 2 of those members of staff had only joined the team within 4 months of going into lockdown. So again, they're on a big learning curve, and again, doing it without that normal day-to-day contact. And at the time of we went into lockdown, we were just in the process of seizing 128 cattle, which on top of everything else, you can imagine, was quite a headache. And it wasn't helped by the fact that the court system basically went to lockdown. They were only dealing with priority police cases. So that meant we ended up having these animals in our care through a contractor for a great deal longer time than we would originally have envisaged. But I'm glad to say that's all been sorted now. All the cattle improved greatly while in our care, and after obtaining the court order, we've sold them. And fortunately, we've had some money which we've been able to pass back to the original owner. But that investigation and subsequent prosecution is still ongoing. And just to pick up the last bit in 3.6, the COVID enforcement data return. Again, like a lot of things with Welsh Government, this was thrown on us at quite short notice. Understandably, we hold a lot of useful data for Welsh Government when making decisions on their 3-week reviews. So they asked us to start reporting on advice that was being given to businesses that initially were meant to be closed, or as they gradually lifted, the restrictions could generally open, and then the social distancing and other protective measures that they needed to put in place. But again, this when this hit us originally, this was a case of, well, we didn't have codes for recording this. Some people were recording information on spreadsheets, other people were recording it as and when they had the opportunity to update the database. So it was quite a headache. But again, it just gives you a bit of a flavour of the information that and the number of inquiries that we dealt with. And just so you're aware, the totals don't add up with regards to business closure and social distancing, because Welsh Government specifically wanted to know where some advice would be given for both aspects, whereas some advice would only relate to one, hence the reason the totals don't actually add up together. But I'll leave it there for now if you want any questions.
Yep, okay. Thanks for that, Gareth, and same to you guys. Thanks for all your hard work here and everything you're doing, because things just don't stop, do they? And I know with a lot of probably with lockdown, a lot of people have learned how to use the internet as well, which they probably never did many months ago, but now they're getting into it, but then all the things pop up which they don't expect as well, and there's lots of scams and everything you shouldn't press and all them. So I'm sure that'll be keeping you busy in the next foreseeable future. Right, I have Ruth who's signalled to speak. Ruth.
Thank you, Gareth, and I expect you all know mine would obviously be about the animal concerns. I believe the Raglan market did close in the beginning, and then when it opened, you had to book in. You weren't allowed in there. You would just drop the stock off and return home. And I believe then that only the people interested in buying were allowed in there. I think the sellers and buyers are allowed in now, and I believe they've opened the cafe. But whether this will continue, obviously with TB, you can't go there either. So there's quite a lot of concerns. And of course, a lot of stock goes straight to Merthyr or to Foyles in the forest. I don't know where they're standing now, because that was a concern in the slaughterhouses. And I think I know the one where you said you had a lot of cattle in your care and you reimbursed the farmer in question. But I hope that the council managed to deduct all the feed that they had to put into those animals before they were the balance was returned to the farmer. But we do appreciate the hard work that you do, because it's not easy going around the countryside, and obviously enforcement things are more difficult, as even finding planning. There's far more enforcement cases coming up because people are doing things that maybe they shouldn't be doing. But I'm sure there's a lot of still hard work for you now through the winter, and we wish you all with that as well. Good with it. And thank you for your help. Thank you, Gareth. David.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. And yes, yeah, you're right. Early on, we stopped attending the markets because obviously health and safety of our staff were paramount. And gradually, it didn't take long for complaints to start filtering through, and Welsh Government were very quick to approach us on an all Wales basis to try and get people back attending, because I think the number of animals going through that wouldn't normally have got through were starting to creep up. I can't say specifically at Raglan, but certainly we did hear about it in other parts of the country. And yes, we made sure that the proceeds of the sale all came to ourselves, and we've deducted our full costs of the officers' time involved in looking after the animals.
Well done.
Thank you very much indeed.
Martin.
Thank you, Chair. It's for Linda, I guess. My question. It's about licensing, and forgive me, I may not be totally up to date. I've been one of the unfortunate people who foolishly went to France, and so I've had to be in quarantine. So I've been looking a lot at my back garden in recent days. Since pubs reopened and I live in Abergavenny, and I undertake quite a lot of market research around the pubs in town. Some of them I have felt really very safe and secure. Others less so. And the best pubs, for example, you've not been able to get into, you sanitize your hands, you've been told where to go and sit, people have come and served you, everything you would expect to see. Other places, to be honest, I would have been worried even going through the front door of the pub. People crowded around the bar, no social distancing inside the place. People, as the evening's gone on, congregating outside in the doorway in considerable numbers. And then over the last couple of days, since the 10 p.m. closure, for example, I saw Andy Burnham on the news with footage of huge numbers of people congregating outside pubs at 10 o'clock. I'm worried that at the best of provision, people will be very safe. Elsewhere, they may not be so safe. Is there, within your team, are you able to discern where you don't have to put much effort in, and other places where, unfortunately, perhaps you give a bit more support to enable the licensees to keep people safe? And secondly, this may be almost an area for politicians to join you. Would it be useful, do you think, if there was pressure not only on pubs to shut at 10 o'clock, but also at other places that sold alcohol? So that Andy Burnham's point, for example, was that people pour out at pubs at 10 o'clock and then go and buy loads of alcohol in an off license and just go back to somebody's house. So that obviously people then put at considerable risk. Now, that's a political decision, maybe. Is there scope for politicians to support you, for example, by putting pressure on the Welsh Government to say that alongside pubs having to stop serving alcohol at 10 o'clock, licenses in supermarkets and off licenses would also have to stop serving, potentially even a bit earlier, say 9:30, so that people don't nip out of the pub for the last second dash to the supermarket. So 2 points really. One is, can you give differentiated support to help all pubs become as secure as the best? And secondly, is there a role perhaps for us councillors to push the Welsh Government to change the regulations about the sale of alcohol? Thanks.
Yeah, I can answer the two things on there actually. I'm actively involved as well with Welsh Government meetings on sort of the alcohol side of it. So we are getting our message direct through for licensed venues. With regards to the 10 o'clock finish, initially they were going to allow sort of like off licenses and sort of home deliveries from supermarkets to continue. However, they changed that, and that was through much lobbying really from licensing officers, in that after 10 o'clock everything shuts down. So you're off licenses, cannot sell alcohol, your shops cannot sell alcohol, your supermarkets, they're not permitted to sell it in the stores. They also can't do home deliveries where alcohol is involved. Similarly, in hotels where you've got residents staying, you can't have the 24-hour drinking, having room service where alcohol is in. So all of it literally stops at 10 o'clock. And that was through much lobbying really from licensing officers. So to give you an update of that. With regards to sort of licensed venues, you are going to get some good, you are going to get some bad, and you're always going to get that. We have, though, in fact, got a program now over the next few weeks, literally targeting the town centres. So all licensing officers and all licensed venues will be getting those visits. And if we have any which are really so badly managed, we can do improvement notices, and we can also have the closure powers as well. So we are getting to those venues. There's been a lot of learning curve, like I mentioned sort of earlier on, with regards to getting the message out there. So we made sure every licensed premises know what they are required to do. There is a frequently asked questions as well on the Welsh Government site that has been issued to all licensed venues. So there's no grey area really which says, are we able to do this? Are we able to do that? They know exactly what they're able to do. So we are targeting those, but we'd like to, obviously, we only have a small team. We've got 5 staff, which is 4-time equivalent. So if we do hear of it, then we'll follow it up. Every complaint we get, we follow up as well. So rest assured, those ones we're not managing properly, we will be targeting. And also, it is a difficulty with outside mingling of areas when they're all starting to shut at 11 o'clock and you've got 20 minutes drinking up time, because that's what the is in Wales to England, whereas they had literally everything stops at 11 o'clock. They changed that in Wales, where they would allow drinking up time up until 20 minutes to try and stagger it slightly, of people sort of closing from the last orders to going out of the pub as well. Another step that they are looking at over the next couple of weeks is the takeaway venues. The difficulty that we have in licensing is that a takeaway venue only requires a license if they serve hot food and drink after 11 o'clock. Well, obviously pubs are coming out at 10 o'clock. So we couldn't sort of have any powers in licensing to sort of deal with those takeaways from that 10 o'clock to the 11 o'clock sort of element. So that would be something that government would have to introduce if they say takeaways to stop people mingling at takeaways have to shut at the same time as the pubs. So that's something they are looking at quite at the moment. I mean, I think they were a bit reluctant to shut takeaways because of people working different shifts. They may want to use the food venues. So they're looking at all other elements as well, and how it's managed and various other things, So I'm hoping I'm answering sort of some of the questions, firstly of the 10 o'clock finish, and also then with regards to focusing on those badly run premises. But I'd like to hear from anybody who knows of those venues to let us know as well. So you can be our eyes and ears as well, so we can do that one step further of revisiting. Dave, I see you've got a hand up as well.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Dave, you want us to step in on?
Yeah, just to add to that, Chair, is this issue of, perversely, you could have more gatherings as a consequence of the 10 o'clock curfew. So I raised that. I sit on the Gwent Regional Group. And I raised that last Wednesday, I think, before they actually came out with it on the Thursday. So that's been escalated for members' information to the Strategic Coordinating Group. So the likes of Matt Phillips and Paul Matthews sit on that. And I know that question's gone back to Welsh Government. So very much Linda's point, isn't it? We can enforce what's before us, but there are some question marks on the 10 o'clock shut. Everything simultaneously stops, and for those with good memories will remember the Licensing Act 2003 is brought in to overcome that issue. The police were complaining of peak times of people being piling out at the same time. So staggered opening can actually assist in distributing people more evenly. And also the whole issue about house parties, if we can think back to when we were 18 to 22, then perhaps, 10 o'clock seems a bit early. Let's stack up, as Linda says, unfortunately, you can't roll up to Tesco's and buy some booze at 10 o'clock. It is a curfew for off licenses as well. However, there is a real issue then in terms of house parties. So that's been raised through the Gwent Police, and I know that's been raised at the highest level. So it is a very valid point that's been fed up through the reporting system back to Welsh Government. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay. I think as well, the winter's coming and the dark nights and the cold and the rain and things like that. So if they want to gather outside, it's going to be a different scenario then. They probably all want to be going inside. So that's something we're going to have to really watch, isn't it? The congregation in closed areas as well now, because they won't want to be standing out in the cold and rain. But it's a shame, really, that, you know, I mean, we've still got that just part of society just doesn't want to accept that it's not feasible and not right to be doing it. You know what I mean, but there you go. Right, I have Louise. Louise?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question really is a general question in relation to both of the reports, really. My concern is that about staffing and resource issues, because obviously the situation with regard to normal public health work has increased because of the COVID situation on checking premises and making sure everything is safe and running safe. And also, obviously, you've got the mutual support that you offer to the other Gwent areas, but the fact that they need mutual support is there enough staffing resources within within Wales to assist, because obviously we could end up being in lockdown as well, and the other areas being swamped won't be able to necessarily provide that mutual assistance. So, and also the question is do we are we making because obviously resources in Monmouthshire are tight, are we including within any claim as a result of COVID, the extra work that environmental health are having to do because of to make premises and so forth COVID safe? And the other question is a specific question on the report. On page 11, I don't understand the heading of businesses and what that exactly means. So if that table could be explained, that would be helpful. But and also really to say, thank you for all your hard work, but I'm a bit concerned that, perhaps it's too much and perhaps Welsh Government need to be giving you more resources.
Shall I come back, Chair?
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. The whole resources issue has been raised with WLJ and Welsh Government. You are right, and hopefully this report, the second report particularly, has tried to articulate that. This is what we do generally, and just top of my head, I think Hugh's team's 19% increase in service requests, as we call them. Gareth's team's 51%. Jill's team's up 45%. So you are right. How does what gives in effect? So that's been raised as two. The here and now issue is that TTP is funded through a particular WG funding stream. So all the overtime weekends, which is quite considerable at the moment, that's all reclaimed back through the Welsh Government grant that runs till the end of March. So we're doing that. The Welsh Government also said we appreciate this issue with enforcement on the streets, and that's not just environmental health and training standards licensing, also Gwent Police, house parties and stuff, and how do we overcome that? And that there's 500,000 potentially coming forward. That was announced last week. So we just need to follow that up with Welsh Government and WLJ in terms of some COVID marshals. I think we've probably seen them on the streets of England and way in Liverpool and London, Soho, etc. Just to do that sort of additional work, and it's very much out of hours as well, isn't it? So certainly our staff have been out of hours, but we're certainly not a blue light 24/7 service. So there is some assistance there in terms of the on the street monitoring, and then they can actually deal with some of those problematic pubs as well. House parties, accumulations around takeaways would be very much their role. So I think that's the here and now. And I think also you're asking, well, what happens longer term? That has gone back to Welsh Government to say you know, we struggled pre-COVID, and this has really emphasised the problem that we're currently in. What happens now? So that there's
I don't want the staff to become over-exhausted, and I think there's a danger of that, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so people deal from false widow spiders all the way through to housing complaints to, you know, scams, and hopefully the report reflects that. So it is busy at the best of times, and that's across all 3 teams of Ramp Health, Training Standards and licensing. So it is on their radar. And similarly, that has gone up through that reporting mechanism I mentioned to the strategic coordinating group. They're overseeing this whole TTP progress, etc. What are we doing in response to it daily? And that has been fed back to Welsh Government to say, you know, that, you know, we don't want the wheels to fall off the wagon. What happens in terms of longer term? And then there's conversation then about apprenticeships and other things, because the money's been taken away from training schemes. We don't have a trainee EHO, for example, because of budgetary requirements. So, you know, perhaps medium to long term, we need to really start thinking about that again. So just to assure members that that's something that has been raised, and we just need to think that through logically as to what supports existing staff, so you know they don't fall over, and also longer term, how do we actually potentially look to increase those staff numbers, because I think there's a real strain on this COVID pandemic.
Yeah,
serve to illustrate that very point.
Okay, thanks, Dave. And say I do have every time we see you, Dave, it's always on strain, isn't it? And so we don't seem to take any. There's no slack there, that's for definite. And so we as a council, we're going to have to make some serious decisions probably in the future on where we go in how to support and sustain really sustainable departments, how we could sustain them. I've got Sheila just wants to come in. Louise,
just a specific question about the
sorry, Sheila. Louise is wanting to step back in. I'll allow her to come back in, Sheila. Okay, Louise, back in.
Yeah, it was just the second question about understanding the table on page 11 and the I think it was 003 on businesses. I didn't really understand what the table meant, so just an explanation of that, please.
I think that was you, Gareth, wasn't it? Is that you, Gareth? Yeah, just explain that the numbers were of whatever.
Yeah, I'll try and explain a little bit with the Welsh Government. What they wanted, 003 in particular, is the number of premises proactively advised. So early on, the conversation was very much around businesses that had to close, and there was very few that were able to open. But obviously, we still had premises who were trying to very cleverly, should we say, come up with a new version of what category their business fell into, so that they could avoid the necessity to close. And it's remarkable how many businesses could come up with new definitions. So they escape me now, but I'd love to come back for some of them. But again, it was very much along the business need that if they were a business required to close, then that's the conversations that we had. So wherever possible, certainly Linda had an awful lot of conversations where they were very proactive in giving advice out, you know, to the various businesses that said, no, you're not allowed to open, you don't fall under that category, this is your main business. But you know, what I'd like to add in there was it was very difficult, especially from an enforcement perspective, because again, you're interpreting legislation which isn't fully defined, and often the guidance doesn't go into detail. And you know, you had the business where supermarkets were allowed to open, and it wasn't defined what they could and couldn't sell. They were allowed to open, full stop. And then you had garden centres who had to close. Yet there were some garden centres, because they sold food, they were able to open. But other garden centres were, well, hold on, you know, they can open, and yet these supermarkets could sell plants and flowers. So, you know, it caused an awful lot of confusion, and it was very difficult to enforce. But yeah, the definition of the business closures there related to those businesses that specifically should have been closed at that point.
Okay, Louise.
Thank you.
All right. Sheila.
Thank you, Chairman. And can I offer my thanks to all, because this is such a vital, essential service that you're doing. and we do appreciate it. I just don't want to take up too much of your time. The report is excellent, and the information you've passed up this morning to us has been very informative, so thank you for your time. But one concern I have had, well, first of all, thank you for responding to my queries. I didn't want to be bothering your department at such a time when you're all so very busy, but I did have some urgent queries, and I couldn't find, I did go through the information on the various websites, and as I couldn't source it myself, I came to you and I had immediate response, and I was very, very grateful for that, because it made the difference between the types of businesses and community centres, what they could and couldn't carry out, was just one example. So this leads me to the fact that I know you've mentioned it in the report, and interpreting the guidance for all of us is complicated. Is there any way in which we can help with this? If you would, I mean, I look repeatedly at the things change all the time. You've been dealing with this for several months now. I know you're working with comms, you mentioned comms as well. But if we could get more information possibly on our website for people to access relevant, important information. Just a suggestion. I just wanted to run that past you because and make you aware how concerned we all are about bothering you at a time like this. And if we can access information more easily as we go through this period, if we can, we're learning all the time. And I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's certainly helpful. Thanks, Councillor Woodhouse. And again, we'll feed back to the front line. They've been under some strain. I know all members have reflected that. Yeah, this whole issue about the difficulty is that the regs change literally weekly. We sit probably like yourselves on a Thursday to see what the latest is that's going to come our way. So the advice we gave on a Tuesday, is that redundant? So it's extremely difficult. I think, yes, perhaps we can put something on the website which perhaps links directly to the wales.gov site, because what people do, they look at the wrong stuff, and there's very often people look at the English legislation, which again is very different. So events, you know, just very quickly, I've got the 10k run over the Old Severn Bridge. We say no, you can't have it because it's a mass gathering. When you get people together, it's going to be over 30 people. Welsh Government said it's a no-no. Gwent Police were on board. We said you can't do it. So they come from South Gloucestershire and done exactly the same run because they can do it in South Gloucestershire. So just one sort of anomaly, if you like. But it actually navigating your way through these regs has been a nightmare. As if nods from colleagues. And yeah, some EHOs have literally been tied up with this. They've been on calls about show jumping, motor, you know, when is a motor show a car boot sale, you know, so sometimes people are trying to get a way around it. But it's been, it has been very difficult. It's difficult to give up-to-date guidance, but I think perhaps that's the way forward, Councillor Woodhouse, is to give them the live link with that proviso. Let us know if you still need advice to try and, I think your point, isn't it? There's an awful lot of traffic on this. How do we try and reduce the burden to the front line? So we'll certainly look to do that, and we can speak to Abby Barton and see what we can do. Thank you.
Cheers, Dave. Linda?
Thank you.
You're just on mute, Linda.
Oh yeah, I think I'd get used to it by now, wouldn't you? I just want to echo Dave's comments really, that you know, with regards to the website, that we try and put stuff on as soon as we know ourselves, you know, put it onto the website. One of the things we did do in licensing was get the emails of all the premises licenses. So we literally trawl through hundreds of records, you know, to get that, so that when we get information, we can farm it out really quickly to them, you know, because it is confusing for them. And like you said, you know, it's hard when you're sort of trawling through websites trying to look for the relevant bits that's really, you know, is relevant to your sort of venue. So we have done that extra bit of work as well to try and get the license holders knowing firsthand what needs to be done, you know. So but I take your point, you know, it would be better to have sort of direct links to the Welsh Government sites rather than sort of piecemeal stuff being put on there, so people can look direct as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Linda.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Sheila, yeah. Linda, may I ask a question of you, please? Yeah. You said your team is comprised of probably four people of going round, and I'm just trying to picture in my head now. We have four major towns: Caldicot, Monmouth, Abergavenny, Chepstow. How do you actually manage and monitor, let's say, from Friday through till Sunday on the 10 o'clock issue? When do you team up? Have you got a team, let's say, COVID with one person? So how many would, let's say, go to Chepstow on a Friday night, let's say, to just make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do? Because it is important, because if they don't, we're finding out that actually maybe the one reason why we're going where we don't want to go, because people just don't want to adhere to the rules. How do you manage that then with 4 of you, perhaps 8 of you? Not even, you can't, it's impossible, isn't it?
It is hard, you know. I'm not going to lie to you, but we have got a very good working relationship with the police licensing officers, so that if they pass this information as well, and they send out police to sort of venues. We have, like I said, we've got an inspection program now, which looks at sort of going through the day as well to various licensed premises. If we get a tip off from the police that something happened the night before, we'd revisit those premises in the day. So we would target those that we're getting complaints on. But like I said, we are going to go around them all eventually. And as you quite rightly say, we've got sort of 3 areas that the officers sort of cover. So you've got like an area A, which is Abergavenny. You've got B, which is sort of Monmouth and Usk. So Raglan, sort of the main sort of town areas. And then you've got the area C, which covers sort of Caldicot and Chepstow. Like you said, we've got a really good working. We are lucky in that we've got a good working relationship with the police and the police licensing officers. We get information firsthand when they get logs. We get that information, so we target those first before any others that we visit, and that's the only way we can do it, really, because we are such a small team, really. And that's what I was saying earlier, that, you know, if you got information, pass it through to us so we can do the problematic ones first and prioritize those first.
Okay, so could I just ask a question then? So like a COVID team, so let's just say off the top of my head, you know, if you were going to do a spot check on a premises for selling alcohol to underage drinkers, you would organise that trip, i.e. we're going to go to whatever, and you'd probably have 2 or 3 officers there. You would collected all your data to find out whether it's worth doing that. So you're going to do the trip there. So how would you, let's say, go to Abergavenny on a Friday night and just drop in there? Is that how it happens, or are you just relying on the police to report back? Because it's as though I saw somebody in Abergavenny on Sunday afternoon with somebody with an orange jacket on, and I thought, oh, they shouldn't be on their own, and it was cyclists who'd brought them down, actually, and I didn't know why they were there, and I didn't know whether it was one of our officers or not who was there speaking to them, because they had to get from A to B, perhaps because they brought them down, or they were checking where they were from, let's say, I don't know. And I was just in my head then, I thought, well, that's that question, is how would you, let's say, drop on Abergavenny on a Friday night and say, oh, they're here. Do you know when you used to see a policeman walking around and you'd say, oh, he's here again, he is. Oh, flipping licence is here again, we better be careful. Because it does have that effect, doesn't it? It's like a speed camera on a road. If it's there every Friday, you know you don't speed there on a Friday, don't you? Like, you may do it the rest of the week, but you don't do it on a Friday. Is that something we're going to be working on? Because it is these premises, it don't matter who they are, it's not the premises, it's the people who are in there, and perhaps after the 10 o'clock they're congregating outside, and just advising them and making sure, look guys, you know, I mean, we need to move on, and we can't do this. Like, is that how we're going to look at it in the future, or is it just we just haven't got the manpower to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixture. Enforcement is a mixture, really. You know, you could have the premises that didn't think about the extra measures that they could possibly put in place. So we give them guidance on that, you know, so, you know, possibly have sort of door supervisors, you know, to sort of go at the venue, have more staff to check sort of pinpoint areas where people are sort of merging together, you know. So it's a number of things that we would look at. We'd look at sort of COVID, so how are tables separated? Are they clicking people in because they've got to be seated to be served alcohol and food, you know? So how are they checking number capacity and things? So there's all manner of things we would give them advice on. And there's a mixture. You could have, if we got intelligence coming through that this premises is so badly run every sort of Saturday night, we may do a spot check with the police, you know, so it'll be licensed officers going out with the police, specifically doing a quick spot check off the cuff, sort of not pre-warning them to see, is there a problem at this venue? We've got so many complaints coming in. And then you've got the sort of program visits where we could ring a license holder and say, look, we're going to come in tomorrow, have a look at your premises, just see how you're sort of running it, just see what sort of stuff you put in place, what risk assessments have you got to deal with COVID, because they have to have a risk assessment as well to say how we manage, if they can't have tables the 2 meter apart, what mitigating measures they put in place to have screens in between, sort of back to back sort of seating. So there's all manner of things that we would look at. So it's a mixture really, like I said, you've got ad hoc visits with the police, where licensing would go out to the police, especially in the night time. We wouldn't tend to have one then. It would be an operation if it's a badly run premises. So we have to assess what is required for that type of visit. Is it information? Is it guidance? Or is it much more heavy-handed approach where we go enforced because we tried all elements of working with them beforehand, giving them advice, and they're still not listening to what we're saying, So it's a difference on each one, really.
Yeah, there's a two-pointer here, though, isn't it? Inside the premises is the landlord's responsibility. Outside on the pavement is the responsibility of us, really, isn't it? Because they're on public property there, on the pavement, on outside, really. Whether that zone they're in may be the landlords, but generally if they're going to congregate after, it's going to be probably the local authority's responsibility, being outside on the public pavement, and that is. Looking at what's going on elsewhere, we're quite lucky at the moment, but I think I'm just trying to get to is I can't see the time from 10 or whatever you have as closing. They aren't going to change. They just still want to congregate, and they will get drinks. So they go the off license at 9 o'clock and whatever.
It's exactly that.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty, isn't it? I mean, with regards to sort of seating outside, because they use more outside space because of the sort of having the 2 meter sort of restriction, they are still required to manage that outside seating, the license holder. But then you've got difficulty when, like you said, they all pile out at 11 o'clock, as Dave 10 o'clock, as Dave sort of mentioned previously, that you are going to get people congregating. You're going to get people congregating going to takeaways. You're going to get people congregating all in the streets from various venues coming together. And that's the difficulties. And it's the police are also in the Welsh Government meetings, to say what problems they are having dispersing people. We try and get the taxi trade there so that they can sort of get people out quickly from town centres, but you are going to get that problem because it's gone away from being the staggered approach of licensing hours, finishing at different times, to finishing 10 o'clock drinking. So is dealing with those issues and sort of looking at ways forward when this is carrying on being sort of problematic, really.
Yeah. Gareth, just want to step in?
Yeah, please, just picking up on that point, because it was quite interesting yesterday. A colleague in Neath Port Talbot circulated an advert in Neath Port Talbot to put out for 8 COVID enforcement officers up until the end of March. And, it's like Dave said, we've taken the approach that it's the environmental health and wider public protection colleagues that are taking forward the tracing, because we've got the skills and that makes sense. But of course the consequences are then we've got less on the enforcement side to be able to go out and do it, or to cover both elements, and it does stretch staff. And I'm looking at my staff now, and this year, whilst we've always had to be reactive the last number of years, we've got 2 key projects that we really need to deliver and move forward. And part of the thinking behind that was the money it would bring in would either go on to support additional staff in years to come, or would offset costs this year, which would help obviously with budget surplus problems, or deficit problems rather. And I think these are the things now that are going to be important, because originally we were thinking, September and October, it will calm down, we can start focusing on the feed programme, which would bring in this additional resource, or the animal health partnership delivery programme that I lead on for Wales. Again, I've had to have a difficult conversation yesterday to say, look, yes, it's all very well offering us the money, but we haven't got the feet on the ground to do the work. And I can't give it to people who are already stretched. So we've got to the point now where we've fought to get this money, but we've turning around and saying, actually, we can't take it this year unless you can give it to us to help support the ongoing COVID issues. And I just think it needs that wider conversation, because individually authorities, we're all hard at it, and it needs that support at a higher level.
Yeah, all right, that's great, Gareth. Thanks, Gareth. So COVID marshals, like we've been hearing about within the larger cities and towns, is probably the way forward if we have to go long term with this. Yes, probably. We have to think about that, because this party time coming up, isn't there? This Christmas coming up for the big cities and the big towns like your Newports and your Cardiffs. Whether we're still in that kind of lockdown there, but we need to make sure that Monmouthshire, we try and keep it as low as possible, and as I say, we don't want to be going up into them big figures in the next couple of months. If we can help it, who knows? Things can change daily, but we're talking about the marshal side of this and helping and in bringing them on board, are we? Like, Dave, is that the way we're looking at it?
Yeah, literally I got a meeting this afternoon, Chair, with HR as to what that looks like, but the funding has been agreed. I think we put a bid in for 4. But with a mutual support arrangement as per TTP. So obviously if things are really problematic in Newport and they need to blitz it based on local intelligence, there'll be some reciprocal arrangements. But yeah, we just need to think that through. It's literally just come through. So obviously that would help with the very issues you've raised, Chair, in terms of that sort of day-to-day, what happens on a Friday night in Abergavenny, how do we respond? It's got to provide some capacity and ease that pressure on the existing staff. So hopefully we can move that forward relatively quickly with the Christmas season coming fairly soon.
Yeah, and it's not as though it doesn't happen the week after. If it happens the once, that is it. We can go from 3 or 4 to well, wherever the contact is, and after that, then we can go from 11 or 12. We could go to 30 within inside a week, couldn't we? Easy, and that's how critical it is, isn't it? Like to have 4 or 8 marshals in them towns on the weekends, just making sure people adhere to the law and adhere to the rules could be so important. We're talking about millions of pounds worth of lost revenue for people in business, etc. If you go into a lockdown as a county, like, it's massive, isn't it? Because we perhaps should have put marshals in the town centres, let's say. I don't know. I'm just on the bigger picture. It's crazy that actually we not us, but they should have been looking at this now. We should be doing it ASAP. We shouldn't even be talking about it. I think we should be just getting on with it and finding suitable people to carry that out with the relevant bodies. But there you go. Good luck today anyway. Right, have any more questions from anyone? No hands showing up. Guys, thanks very much and good luck. And I know it's difficult, but if you ever need us, you know where we are and we're always support. And should we say we'll perhaps can update us, Dave, whenever possible, perhaps, I don't know, after Christmas, let's say, if it quietens off or whatever, January, I don't know. We'll look at that, is it? And whenever you have a minute.
What I put on the
Hazel, I think, was that Hazel? Sorry.
Hazel come in, Chair.
Yeah. Hazel?
Sorry, yes, Chair. I was communicating with you via text.
Sorry.
It's okay. I just suggested that perhaps in 6 months' time you might want to return, Dave, to give us an update on the position. And the other point, Chair, was about giving your support to colleagues should they wish to contact you in any discussions with partners. But yeah, thank you very much, and we'll programme you in for a return.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks, members, and I'm sure everybody, leaders and the cabinet, will pass on all them thanks as well. Take care. All the best. Good luck with your meetings. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Right, members. Let's go into agenda item number 7. I see Tony has left us. Tony has gone to, he's had to shoot off. Did everybody receive an email off Hazel yesterday about a report Tony had done, like a briefing session? I picked it up this morning. I've had a quick look at it, and Tony's made some valid points in there. Shall I or Hazel speak with Tony and just run through this with him, and then if there's anything to bring back to the next meeting on at the end of October, there we keep that date. We'll bring it back. Is everybody happy with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's
Yeah, do that. Yeah, good idea.
Okay, yeah, I'll speak with Hazel and we'll speak with him on that. Okay, right, we're okay with that one. Right, the work programme, Hazel, do you just want to run through that with us? And there was a suggestion there by Louise. She's going to feed into the health board there, and Paul came on board then about that. So are we going to link that one in, Hazel? What do you think is best to do to do the initial with Louise and then the rest of the work programme? What do you think is best with where we are at the moment? Thank you.
I think with the suggestion that Louise has made, Louise is a good point of contact for you. And now that she's vice chair of the committee, I think it would make sense for Louise to represent the committee and to feed back to the committee as she's been doing. And thank you for that, Councillor Brown. It's been very helpful, and I can continue to forward the emails to members. Councillor Pavia has made a suggestion to us this morning. He's had to leave the meeting, but he suggested that we include in our forward work programme a discussion with the health board about their Q3 to 4 recovery plans. So he's thinking about their operational plan for the start of next year, and particularly his concern is harm from a reduction in non-COVID-19 activity. So he's thinking about the elective and routine services that have not been restarted, or those that are at limited capacity. So I think that's something we could add, and we could, I can get in touch with the health board chair. I've got contacts there, and I can try and get that tabled for you. I'm not thinking that would be at your next meeting, Chair. Your next meeting in October, we've got quite a sort of housing focus. So there'll be some reports to come to you on the housing allocations policy, and also a sort of situation report on homelessness. So that was programmed in during the summer. So your next meeting will be sort of, perhaps I can look to the subsequent meeting to have a discussion with the health board.
Yeah, that's great, wonderful. I've got Louise and then Ruth want to come in. Louise?
Yeah, just a quick thing. I mean, the sort of community champion meeting is a fairly informal type of meeting, but it certainly would be useful to have the health board representatives to come along to Adult Select, you know, as you suggest, because you know, we don't have that same feedback that I seem to be getting through the you know, the Facebook engagements and various other things that are very useful to give people information on what's going on. I think it's a shame that they have taken up my suggestion of emailing some town and community councils, but I think it would be useful if they emailed the all councillor list for Gwent, you know, because then they would be sending out that information, which is in the public domain, you know, because some of the questions I think that were asked in the chat bar about sort of, you know, COVID and extra work with people after they've had COVID, a lot of those questions have already been asked and answered, you know, so I think I don't know if that could be suggested as well. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Are we okay with that, Hazel?
Yes, Chair. I'll get in touch with Councillor Brown about that, and we'll try and include that in our email to the health board.
Okay, wonderful. Ruth?
Thank you. And it's just that perhaps I've missed it, but did Louise accept the proposal to be vice chair? Is it noted in the minute? I'm not sure whether she did or not, but she's a wonderful one to be carrying on the health issues. And also, even with Dave Jones, he mentioned that it is a strain on the respiratory part of the body as far as COVID is concerned. A few years ago, they started a program of, I'm not sure if it was 70 plus or 65, that they should have the measles and pneumonia injection. So having the pneumonia injection, and I've had one that's supposed to last you for a lifetime or the rest of your life or whatever. Does that stand you in any better stead if you should contact COVID? I don't know if anybody can answer that question. Thank you, Chair.
I'm not too sure, Ruth, but we can ask the question. If you will, we just email that to Dave and ask him, see what the position is on that. I tell you what, I forgot to ask today, and I know I mentioned it yesterday in the select committee yesterday. These bonfires and things, people burning rubbish and garden waste and whatever. The tip's not being open still to people, because you've got to do the booking, and people just don't want to do that, i.e. they're willing to, but I think long term we need to be very careful what happens there, as reference to what you said there about health things and things like that, Ruth, especially in our towns. And I do have quite a lot of complaints in my area about people burning rubbish, etc. So it's something we just have to bear in mind. If you're sitting on your other select committees or whatever, just make sure you keep focused on that, on the reason of these sites not being reopened to anybody. But the health side of it, yeah, is so important there. So yeah, I think we'll pose that question. Ruth, take your hand down now, please, because I think we're done there, aren't we now?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just to say happy to accept Vice Chair, and thanks for the...
Oh, yeah, that's all right.
I didn't get a chance to come in, I think, after the vote, you see. So anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you, Louise, but I just wondered if somebody can answer the question as far as the pneumonia vaccination is concerned, because everybody's been promoted now to have their flu jab. So mine's already booked in for Sunday. But, you know, we all have to play our part, not just social distance and everything, but our taking care of our general health on top of that. Thank you, Chair.
Does anybody know what the age limit is for that? Because in England now, if you're over 50, you can have the flu jab. What's it in Wales? Anybody know?
Yeah, you can. There's no age limit if you pay for it, and it costs £70 from a pharmacist, from Boots Pharmacist.
But over 50, Simon, is when you have particular need or disabilities or something. I don't think it's just anybody over 50.
Okay, no. Is that in England or in Wales?
Well, I think it's general, to be honest. Yeah. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, all right, no problem. Right, I think I'll give it a miss then. Let's go into the cabinet forward work plan. I did have an email, received an email, and everybody received the email from Democratic Services about that should be going out on a Friday. And have we anything on there that we just need to look at the moment? Anybody noted anything on the planner from cabinet? So that'd be decisions being made by the council, single member or cabinet decisions, which we just need to look at reference to before they're made. Has anybody got anything on there? You've all gone quiet on me. Hello?
No, I don't think so, Chair. I had a look at it. I didn't think so.
No, we're okay with that.
I don't think so either.
All looks good to me.
Yeah, we've got the home search allocations policy 20th of October for us, yes. Louise Corbett coming and Ian. That's not us, is it? The Gypsum Travel Assessment. Hazel, are you there? Oh, sorry,
yes,
my fault. Yeah, my fault.
Yeah.
That going to come to us before Christmas, is it then? Yes.
I'm going to chase that up today, Chair.
Okay, great. Yeah. Because so on the 20th, then we've got them two items, and if need be, no, I don't think if that's December, then that will be okay. I don't think they're going to do it. So let's just move on then. So we're all happy with that then. So are we all happy to go with 20th of October here? So do you think them two reports will be with us?
Yes, I'm fairly sure, Chair. I had recent discussions with officers. I think because you're doing quite in-depth sort of scrutiny of these reports, which is good. So I think two for meeting electronically sounds about right. It feels right. Can I just ask whether members are still wanting a pre-meeting, sort of like today we had a sort of late start for pre-meeting, but we had longer in the pre-meeting, so it wasn't as rushed. So you had sort of a good sort of 40 minutes discussion. Does that suit you? Would you like to start the actual meeting at 10:30, and then that gives you, you know, a little bit more time in the pre-meeting? Or would you like to go back to a 9:30 pre-meet? It's up to you.
I'm open. Members, what do you
I
think?
thought this morning was very useful, about the right length of time. I thought it worked well this morning.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Also,
Simon, the only problem is we're starting later. It goes on later. If people have got meetings in the afternoon, it can go on later. Is there anything against having 9:30 start for the pre-meeting, or and then it makes it a little bit? It's up to the rest of you, obviously.
9:30 is okay. It just means that you would need to start the meeting, say, at 10. It's just a little bit rushed for you to have a pre.
Yeah, I think it's better to today 9:45 pre-meeting and then 10:30 meeting.
I
Okay.
agree with Louise.
Okay, so we'll stick with how we've gone today, yeah. If everybody's happy with that, and if it does prove a problem, we can always come back and just move it, can't we? I don't think it's a major problem. Right, thank you everyone. I'm going to close the meeting off. I hope it went okay. It's not easy, we all know that. And as chair, Sheila, you've been there quite a few times.
You did an excellent job.
I don't know
Simon,
where it's
thank
all
you.
gone. I've got some shot in, but there you go, it's gone. Stay safe and keep going. And I
Thank
know
you,
you're
Chair.
working.
Take care.
Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hazel, are we still there? Have we gone? Hello, we all gone? No, we're there.
Just 1 second, Chair, while we pause the recording.
Yeah.
Rob, stop the recording, please.